a 12-kilometer frontline sector in eastern Ukraine. 0600 hours on a recent winter morning, the beginning of what would become a masterclass in deception warfare. Ukrainian forces occupying defensive positions across this sector began what appeared to be a panicked, disorganized retreat. Positions were abandoned hastily, equipment was left behind. Radio traffic indicated confusion and collapse. Russian reconnaissance observed the withdrawal and reported opportunity for exploitation. A Russian division, 5,200 combat soldiers, supported by 94 tanks and infantry fighting vehicles, was ordered to pursue the retreating Ukrainian forces. Over 3 days, Russian forces advanced 15 kilometers, celebrating what appeared to be a decisive breakthrough. On the 4th day, Ukrainian forces struck from both flanks simultaneously. The retreat had been a deception, a deliberate operational trap. 4,347 Russian soldiers would be killed, wounded, or captured. All 94 armored vehicles would be destroyed or abandoned. 623 prisoners would be taken, including the division commander. The textbook maneuver warfare trap would be studied for years. This happened days ago. Prisoners are still being processed. The strategic implications are still being calculated. The tactical deception was nearly perfect. This is what occurred during those 4 days. Operational deception is among the most difficult military maneuvers to execute. It requires discipline to conduct controlled withdrawal while appearing panicked. It requires patience to allow enemies to advance while resisting the urge to counterattack prematurely. It requires precise timing to spring the trap at the optimal moment. Ukrainian forces had been planning this operation for weeks. Intelligence indicated Russian forces in this sector were under pressure to demonstrate offensive success. Command was demanding breakthrough achievements. This created psychological vulnerability that could be exploited through deception. The Ukrainian plan was elegant in simplicity. Conduct a staged withdrawal that appeared genuine. Leave behind damaged or disabled equipment to sell the deception. Allow Russian forces to advance into a salient that would become increasingly difficult to support logistically. Once Russian forces were maximally extended and vulnerable, close the salient from both flanks and destroy the trapped force. Day 1 commenced at 0600, with Ukrainian forces beginning staged withdrawal. Forward positions were evacuated. Some equipment was deliberately left behind. Vehicles that were non-functional or rigged with tracking devices. Radio communications were transmitted in clear indicating panic and disorder. Russian reconnaissance observed the withdrawal through drones and forward observers. Reports indicated Ukrainian lines were collapsing. Equipment was being abandoned. This was assessed as genuine retreat, not deception. Russian command ordered immediate exploitation. At 0930, Russian forces began advancing into the abandoned Ukrainian positions. Initial resistance was minimal. Russian soldiers found abandoned fighting positions, some equipment, and clear evidence of hasty withdrawal. Commander reports radioed back indicated successful pressure had broken Ukrainian defenses. Throughout day 1, Russian forces advanced approximately 5 kilometers. Ukrainian forces conducted fighting withdrawal, engaging briefly, then falling back. The withdrawal appeared realistic because it was based on actual defensive doctrine, just executed deliberately rather than from necessity. Russian command was euphoric. Radio intercepts captured officers celebrating the breakthrough. Higher command transmitted congratulations. The division was ordered to continue exploitation, advance as far as possible before Ukrainian forces could establish new defensive lines. Day 2 saw Russian forces advancing an additional 6 kilometers. Resistance remained light. Ukrainian forces engaged from long range with artillery and anti-tank fires, but didn't attempt to hold positions. Russian commanders interpreted this as Ukrainian forces lacking strength to mount effective defense. The Russian division was now 11 kilometers beyond its original start line, occupying a salient that extended deep into what had been Ukrainian-controlled territory. The salient was approximately 3 kilometers wide and 11 kilometers deep. a narrow finger of Russian control surrounded on three sides by Ukrainian forces. Ukrainian command observed Russian advance carefully. Reconnaissance drones tracked every Russian unit. Artillery was pre-registered on key positions along the salient. Assault forces were positioned on both flanks, concealed and waiting for the optimal moment to strike. Day 3 brought additional Russian advance. The division pushed forward another 4 kilometers, reaching total penetration depth of 15 kilometers. Russian logistics struggled to keep pace. Supply lines stretched across 15 kilometers of terrain required constant security. Fuel and ammunition consumption was higher than planned, but command ordered continued advance. By the evening of Day 3, Russian forces occupied positions 15 kilometers beyond their start line. The division was spread thin across the salient. Forward elements were separated from rear logistics by vulnerable supply routes. Units on the flanks of the advance were exposed to potential Ukrainian attacks, but no attacks materialized. Russian command assessed the situation as strategically successful. 15 kilometers of advance in 3 days was significant achievement. Ukrainian resistance appeared broken. Plans were developed for continued exploitation on Day 4. Ukrainian forces finalized their preparations during the night of Day 3. Assault forces positioned on both flanks were ready. Artillery fire plans were complete. Communications were verified. At 0500 on Day 4, final orders were transmitted. Commence assault at 0530. At 0530 precisely, Ukrainian forces launched coordinated attacks from both flanks of the salient simultaneously. 8 separate battalion-sized task forces struck Russian positions along both sides of the 15-kilometer salient. The northern flank attack engaged Russian forces, securing the supply route. Artillery preparations struck command posts and logistics concentrations. Infantry and mechanized forces advanced against dispersed Russian security elements. The Russian units, thinly spread and surprised by the intensity of the assault, fell back in confusion. The southern flank attack mirrored the northern assault. Artillery, mechanized forces, and infantry struck simultaneously along a 6-kilometer front. Russian forces on this flank were even more thinly distributed, attempting to screen a wide area with insufficient strength. Within 2 hours, Ukrainian forces had penetrated Russian flank security on both sides and were advancing toward the supply routes connecting Russian forward elements to rear logistics. The trap was closing. Russian forward commanders recognized the tactical situation at 0745. Radio intercepts captured urgent transmissions. "This is a trap. They deliberately let us advance. We are in a pocket." Request for immediate permission to withdraw was transmitted to higher command. Higher command initially denied withdrawal permission. The advance represented significant achievement that command was unwilling to surrender. Orders were to consolidate positions and prepare for defense against Ukrainian attacks. But consolidation was impossible. Russian forces were spread across 15 kilometers of salient. Forward units were separated from rear elements by Ukrainian forces now astride the supply routes. The division was being cut into isolated segments that could be destroyed individually. By 0900, Ukrainian forces had completely severed Russian supply routes. The division was trapped in 3 separate pockets: forward elements at the deepest penetration, center elements along the supply route, and rear elements still near the original start line. Russian forces attempted to fight through Ukrainian blocking positions. A mechanized battalion attacked south, attempting to reopen supply routes. Ukrainian anti-tank teams and artillery engaged the attack, destroying or disabling 23 armored vehicles in 37 minutes. The breakout attempt failed. Ukrainian forces began systematic reduction of the isolated Russian pockets. Artillery engaged Russian positions continuously. Infantry and mechanized forces advanced methodically, compressing Russian perimeters. Air defense systems were destroyed, allowing Ukrainian drones to operate freely and direct precision fires. The forward pocket, containing approximately 800 Russian soldiers and 31 armored vehicles, was subjected to intensive fires throughout the morning. By noon, ammunition was running low. Fuel was depleted, casualties were mounting, radio communications with higher command were intermittent. At 13:20, the commander of the forward pocket transmitted surrender offer. His forces were combat ineffective. Further resistance would only result in additional unnecessary casualties. He requested terms for surrender. Ukrainian command accepted surrender. Ceasefire was established for that sector. 234 Russian soldiers surrendered, including the pocket commander and 11 officers. The remainder were casualties or had already fled individually. The center pocket, containing approximately 2,000 soldiers and 47 armored vehicles, continued fighting through the afternoon. Ukrainian forces tightened encirclement systematically. Artillery prevented Russian attempts at consolidation or breakout. At 1600 hours, a Russian colonel commanding this pocket also offered surrender. His ammunition was critically low, wounded couldn't be evacuated, further fighting was futile. 312 soldiers surrendered, including the colonel and 19 company-grade officers. The rear pocket, containing remaining division elements including the division commander, was the last to surrender. This pocket fought into the evening, attempting multiple breakout attacks. All failed against prepared Ukrainian defensive positions. At 19:30, the division commander transmitted final surrender offer. His command was destroyed. Casualties exceeded 60%. Continuing resistance served no purpose. He requested honorable surrender terms. Ukrainian command accepted. At 2000 hours, 623 Russian soldiers surrendered, including the division commander, a major general, and 34 battalion and company officers. The trap was complete. The Russian division that had advanced 15 kilometers, celebrating breakthrough, had been systematically destroyed. 4,347 casualties from original strength of 5,200. 623 prisoners, all 94 armored vehicles destroyed or abandoned. Ukrainian casualties were significantly lower. Fighting from prepared positions with operational initiative, Ukrainian forces suffered fewer than 400 casualties, including killed and wounded. The casualty exchange ratio was more than 10-1 in Ukraine's favor. The tactical execution was textbook operational deception. Ukrainian forces conducted disciplined fighting withdrawal that appeared genuine. They sacrificed territory temporarily to create exploitable vulnerability. They waited patiently for Russian forces to extend maximally before springing the trap. The timing and coordination were nearly perfect. Russian operational failures were multiple. Intelligence failed to recognize the withdrawal as deliberate deception. They assessed based on desired outcome rather than careful analysis. Planning failed to secure flanks of the advance or maintain adequate reserves. Logistics couldn't sustain forces 15 kilometers beyond start lines. Command refused to authorize withdrawal even when the trap became obvious. The psychological impact was devastating. Russian prisoners reported feeling betrayed by command that ordered them into obvious trap, then refused permission to withdraw until destruction was inevitable. Trust in higher command competence was shattered. The division commander's capture was particularly significant. Major generals rarely become prisoners. His testimony during interrogation provided valuable intelligence about Russian operational planning, command relationships, and tactical doctrine. Eventually, he would be repatriated, but his career was effectively ended. Russian military analysts published extremely harsh criticism. One prominent channel wrote, "This is humiliation beyond words. Our division spent 3 days celebrating a breakthrough that was actually a trap. We advanced into a salient that any military academy student would recognize as vulnerable. We refused to withdraw when the trap closed. Then our general surrendered. This is operational incompetence at every level." Families of casualties and prisoners demanded accountability. Why did command not recognize the obvious deception? Why were flanks not secured? Why was withdrawal not authorized earlier? The questions created political pressure on military leadership. The economic cost exceeded $752 million, 94 tanks and infantry fighting vehicles at approximately $8 million average, $752 million. Supporting equipment added additional losses, but financial costs understated the strategic impact. The division had been designated for major offensive operations. Its destruction removed a formation from Russian planning. Reconstituting the unit would require extensive time for personnel replacement, equipment delivery, and training. The division wouldn't be combat effective for 6 to 12 months minimum. For Ukrainian forces, the operation validated deception warfare doctrine. Demonstrating ability to conduct controlled operational deception proved Ukrainian forces possessed sophisticated planning capability and troop discipline necessary for complex maneuvers. International military observers studied the operation intensively. The engagement demonstrated that classic maneuver warfare principles remain effective in modern combat. Feigned retreats, envelopment, and destruction of overextended forces, tactics used for thousands of years, worked perfectly against a peer enemy in 2025. The battlefield was cleared over subsequent days. Prisoners were processed. Equipment was recovered or destroyed. The tactical site was documented extensively for after-action analysis and training purposes. The numbers define the success. 15 kilometers of Russian advance, 4 days of operation, 4,347 Russian casualties, 623 prisoners including a general, 94 vehicles destroyed, $752 million in losses, Ukrainian casualties under 400. This is operational warfare, where deception defeats strength, where patience creates opportunity, where disciplined execution achieves objectives. The salient is cleared, the prisoners are catalogued, the lessons are documented, and Russian forces learn that apparent victory can be deliberate trap, that breakthrough can be engineered destruction, that 3 days of celebration can become day 4 disaster. Welcome to warfare where the enemy's success is your plan, where retreat is advance, where 4 days transforms triumph into catastrophe.